we can say these things. I'm not disclosing any private information, but yeah, at Hostman I can see this, right? Like how many customers are asking for async KPI support. But on async KPI, I cannot see it because yeah, like you could be using async KPI and not telling us at all, right? So yeah, unless we track it on tooling or unless we track it somehow, and yeah, it's going to be hard to say. But I'm not worried about the exact number. I'm more worried about seeing a trend. You know, if the trend is going up or down, or with whatever we have. I don't need to see the full number. So it's not important in my opinion. So yeah. I guess a good indicator is as long as you have big corporations asking for async KPI support, then it means it's going
the right direction.
beyond what we thought. Beyond the developer tool, let's say, is playing with it for fun and so on. When banks are using it, then it's like, and telcos, then it's like, okay, this is getting serious.
Yep. All right, let's get started. Does any of you have anything you want to add before my Zoom is just gone? I can't see you. What the? Oh, there. Never mind. See it. Okay. Do you folks anything you want to add or discuss?
I will just say that I keep seeing the same issues over and over, the two remaining issues. So might be that we need to get our hands on it. So at least it's not a problem on the spec anymore, and it's only the tooling. Tooling, it's easier to delegate, by the way, because you can delegate to each of the code owners, each of the repo code owners. So
we still have this one, right? So for those who don't know, this one has been completed in the spec, but there's no change in the parser or the JSON schema files, but the traits behavior has not had any
progress lately.
Yeah, I think they got stuck on well, basically just an update from Magic. I can try pinging him and see if he's still interested in pushing it, or
Magic is a little bit busy lately, so
yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure if we should just help him push it forward and finish whatever is left to do there. And
I'll try pinging him and see what happens. What's up?
Yeah. So yeah, because I would love to get rid of all the spec pull requests and be able to say, okay, spec wise is already complete. Right? It's there, it's done. Unless we find something while developing the tools, we don't touch it anymore, and that's it. But this keeps delaying, and only with one or two issues. So yeah. So it was
luckily the traits is not that important for tools per se. It's more an important topic in the parser itself.
In the parser, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So as far as all the other tools goes, they can safely ignore that specific feature as far as I think it is, at least.
Agree.
So that means that from the general public side of tooling is like all the spec changes have been done. We only need the schema union stuff implemented in the parser, but that's more or less it.
All right.
So let's start with this one. So I think it was 2 meetings ago that we actually discussed this concept of not using a specific date, but using tasks as kind of the deadline for when we release version 3.
Yes.
And that is basically what this issue proposes. I'm proposing that all of these tools here needs to be adapted for version 3. So that means CLI, Studio, this is, well, the JSON schema files, the converter, in order to easily convert stuff, because we need that on the spec level as well, because we have a lot of examples. None of us really wants to go through them manually and change them. Would be better if there's just a tool for it. So the React components, this one is probably the one that's gonna take the most time. Then there's the generator, of course, the parser, but there's still some outstanding issues, I think. And the HTML template and the Markdown template. So that's basically the core set of tools that I think most people use one way or another.
Yeah.
That, of course, doesn't mean that the other tools can be adapted as well. It's just this is the bare minimum requirement for us to release version 3. Other tools can, of course, adapt as well and be included in this list, but this is at least when we release it.
Agree. It's a bare minimum.
Yeah.
I agree. We will have Glee as well, but yeah, again, it's not in this list. It should not be in this list.
Same with Madalena, but that's individual, right? So it's like it's not that important. I purposely didn't include any documentation here. And the reason why I didn't include any documentation here, I personally don't see it as something that's required in order for us to merge or release version 3. And I say this because from a spec level, like release coordination type tasks, we have migration guide, and we have basically a release blog post. Those two things combined is, in my opinion, enough to not block a release.
It might be enough for people already using Async API, but if you're landing for the first time on Async API and everywhere it's version 3, but the documentation is telling you something different, version 2 story, then it's going to be highly confusing. Like, what the hell is this? Like, I'm using this tutorial that you have here at the Getting Started guide, and in my Async API 3 file, which is the latest one, and it doesn't work, right? So,
but you wouldn't have that, right?
You don't have what?
So this is the other thing that I wanted to bring up. So in the website, so basically the idea is that version 2 will have all the documentation that we already have. So you can go back, look at version 2 and have specific documentation for that. Version 3, however, we basically start a clean slate in some sense. Remove so that means that you can only see the documentation that are version 3 specific as well. So that means you won't even have access to tutorials. Like, it won't show you a tutorial for whatever that's version 2 specific and doesn't apply to version 3.
So do you mean having like a kind of a version switcher in the website?
Yeah, so the idea is that, well, to look at any version 2 documentation, you go to this link. And everything else for version 3 and onwards is going to be asyncapi.com. So that means that all of the content is specifically for version 3. So you won't ever have that issue that you talked about, Fran, where it's
so then we start without documentation. That's the possibility, that we start like having no docs. at all.
Basically,
yeah. On snkb.com, but you cannot see any docs.
We have we will have whatever documentation we have at the point of where basically all of these things are solved. At that point in time, whatever we have on the website is released. And then they are slowly added on top of that.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not going to be at 0, but we're going to be at whatever we have at the time. Yeah.
Yes, and that's
assuming
why
that we have something at the time.
Yes, and that's why I'm saying that I don't feel like it should be part of this list. But it's not a hard decision. It's more, I don't feel like it should be a blocking or whatever.
We should probably
there might be some specific documentation we want as a blocker. I don't know.
We should probably involve the docs folks about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring it up in the first doc meeting as well.
Yeah, because I feel it's important to at least have the getting started guide and some tutorials. The reference is already there because the reference is the spec. So that's gonna be there. But some getting started guide, which could be probably adapted from what we have right now. So we have we get the current content and we transform everything to SNKB3, except some things that might not make much sense. And yeah, maybe adapting the concepts a little bit, but so not going too far with new docs, but more about like getting what we have, but SNKB3 adapted. Right. So concepts is easy. Most of the concepts still apply. We just have to start using send and receive instead of publish and subscribe, and so it shouldn't be a problem. Producer and consumer are still there, but yeah.
I mean, there's probably a bunch of the documentation stuff that can be like directly ported, like without any change. And if so, that's perfect, right? So we just need that perspective of, is there any documentation that we see as this needs to be there for the release? So we add it. It's that simple. I just didn't find it necessary, but that's just my personal opinion.
Exactly. So we will not start from 0 because even what we have can be probably ported to SNKB3 really quickly. So
yeah.
And for instance, can you go to the getting started guide? So we have introduction, which is probably the same thing. Event-driven architectures remain the same. Coming from OpenAPI might change. So yeah.
Yeah, it kind of depends on how much of this, and we also, of course, have, and this is without even discussing like the new features. Right? It doesn't include publish and subscribe or any of the other stuff. And the same, this is probably a larger undertaking now, but
yeah. So, but this is my point. So a hello world should be easy to do, to port, right? To migrate.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, for sure. I agree.
So we can have at least the getting started guide migrated by then.
So you would say that it's a requirement?
I'm not sure.
That's perfect.
I think we need to define what's the minimum. What's the minimum for decent V3 documentation?
I will say it's a minimum. Yeah, I will say it's a minimum. And also because I know it's not going to take a lot of time for us to change this documentation. We can do it ourselves. We don't have to rely on the docs folks. We know the spec inside out. So let's adapt the docs ourselves as well. It shouldn't be a lot of effort. Except this one, the coming from OpenAPI is going to be a big one, I will say.
Especially since now we have request supply, so it's a lot more cross matching.
Yes, and we probably need, and it's interactive, so it's going to be a little bit more time. So it requires coding, not just changing some parts here and there. So So yeah, and I will just make it match, whatever it is. Make it match the current documentation. If something is to match, then we'll leave it out. And as you said, this will be added later as an improvement to the docs. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a continuous effort, right? And that's also why we have all of these. Is it this? No. That's why we have all of the docs related issues as well and tracking them in order to see what will be part of it and what will not, like all of these. So yeah. So yeah, to me it's just these two. That's to me is the bare minimum. But yeah, let's figure it out. Let's bring it up on because we are gonna have a doc meeting specifically for version 3, so we can discuss it there.
Yes, let's bring it there.
For this issue, I'm thinking about how to get it started, basically. My idea was that once we have the branch, I create the first pull request that removes anything that is version 2 specific. Basically removes it from that specific branch. And then we can slowly add the content back with the version 3 changes from whoever contributes it.
I see what you mean.
So that's basically just the first step, right? In order to see, okay, I'll walk through the concepts, I'll walk through the overview, etc. Is there anything that's version 2 specific? Then I don't include it in the first pull request. And then, or basically removes it. And in subsequent pull requests, we then add version 3 specific, whatever we have ported over from version 2. I think that's kind of the only way I see it being possible, because otherwise we will lose a lot of perspective. And I will, of course, document all of the things that I've removed.
But the outcome is to have like 2 versions, right? In the end. And you can switch and you can go back to the version 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but version 2 will be static. So we will never update anymore. And it will be on another domain. It will not be on asyncubate.com, will be on v2 asyncubate.com. So it will be like for historical reasons, you can still find it. But we will remove it from the robots. We will remove it from robots.txt. So search engines don't find it. And only find the latest documentation and so on. But that's an option, yeah.
But then there is this requirement to add the version support, like to have the version switcher.
But that can be just a link on top, right? So it doesn't have to be super sophisticated. Just a link on the top, like saying, "Are you looking for v2 docs? They're here." That's it, and you navigate to v2.asyncubate.com. And on that side, we have the same thing. Like, you're looking at all docs in case someone lands there by mistake. You might want to look at the latest docs, and that's it. And it takes you to the main one. So yeah. So that shouldn't be super sophisticated. Just a disclaimer with a link, and that's it. Nothing else. Right. No, definitely not a switch. Not like a drop down or anything like that. No. Because we don't have specific documentation for 2.3 or 2.4. We have documentation for version 2.x, which in turn is 2.6, which is the latest one. But yeah. It will be cool, in my opinion, that we start also tracking down in the docs when something has been added. You know, like if we add something, some new features to version 3, right? So version 3.1, we add a new feature, then these things will be somehow marked in the documentation saying this was introduced in version 3.1, right? Because we right now what we have in the docs is representing the latest 2.6 version, right? But
yeah, I mean, sometimes we even have old version.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes in the docs we have old versions and so on. So when we have guides or tutorials and things like this, tutorials not, but on the guides, it would be good to mention that this specific feature was introduced in version X, but for future versions, not for the past ones. Right. So yeah. Would be cool to know. So that if I want to use 3.5, or I want to use 3.2 with a feature that was introduced in 3.5, I want to understand if I can or I cannot. Right? Except, I mean, you can try it and see if it works or not, of course. Maybe it's not that hard now that I'm thinking about it. It's as easy as you try it and see if it works. If it works.
It's gonna be a bit tough for example, this case, because here you pull together a lot of different parts. So it's like, well, some of this are version 2 specific, something of this are in the future version 3 specific. It's gonna be hard to distinguish, like, when can I use what? For example, in a tutorial.
Definitely not in a tutorial. No, tutorials will not cover that. No. Maybe even the specs will mention that somehow. The specs will mention that something was introduced in version X, right? So,
or in the concept, you mean, right?
No, not in the concept, but
it could be part
reference.
And the reference. So if I have, for instance, info object, right? Or this thing here, for instance. ID, for instance, ID is a good example. ID wasn't in the version 2.0, I think. I think it was introduced in 2.1 or something like that. Or maybe I'm wrong. So it was. Okay.
we know what you mean.
Yeah, so something like that, yeah. This, for instance, having servers on channels, I think that's one, or on the operations. You can have server specific channels related to specific servers. That was introduced in 2.3 or something like that. So yeah. So all these changes can be marked maybe on the spec itself. So we should say something. I don't know. Because I was always trying to take version 3 super formal as a formal document, so we don't introduce any of these comments on the spec document because it's a formal document defining the current state of the thing, right, without any other context. But the reality is that we're not being super formal with spec. We're not writing an IETF RFC document. It's more like a little bit more formal documentation, but still like Kinda documentation. So yeah, we can probably start including these things. We may never reach that point where we want to be an IETF or something like that standard, right? A proper standard, let's say. We might never want to do it. So yeah, so why following these rules?
Imagine the rework, restructuring of sentences and formalizing everything.
Oh yeah, it's not, I mean, the spec is not by any means ready to be a formal document. It's leaving a lot of things for interpretation. It's not formal language in many cases. It's we try, but we actually don't seem to like it too much either. So yeah.
I also think it's because not a lot of people are that strict with the language.
You can be. I mean, even if you're not, it's not easy to write like that. It's not easy. It's something that you need to practice. But that's the thing. Like we could be practicing, but none of us seem to be like worried about it and to willing to develop that skill. So, so I wonder if we will ever reach that standards status, because we also are not trying to pursue that goal, like becoming a proper standard. We're also not interested so far in this. So yeah, who cares then, right? We keep improving. That's true, at least.
Agreed. What else? Yeah, this one. So I took the liberty of adding issues for basically all our tools. I'm probably missing some, but it's kind of unintended. But it might have gone missing in the matrix while I did this. So the idea was that we could track who supported version 3 and who did once we release, in some sense or not. And the idea is that we, in this document here, once these are closed, that means that there's support in the library.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was also that code owners had a way to track what was needed in order to support version 3 as well. So it's basically a one-stop for those code owners to discuss whatever is related to version 3 as well. And that's basically the reason why I created all of these issues. And maybe also a little bit for ourselves if we want to actually add the support. These are probably not all of the changes that are needed. There's probably more, there's maybe less. This is just the overview that I had at the time of creating these issues. And there's one in, well, basically everything. I'm not planning on pushing anything further than this. Then it's up to the code owners to take the issues on. And I'm kind of pairing this together with a blog post. Because the idea is that I want the users to ask for support. So the idea is that if you're a user and you see, oh, I know that we're probably going to need request reply right off the gate because that's what we want to use. So we're probably going to update to version 3. And we know we use whatever tool. So the idea is that they can basically ask for the support in whatever library they need it for. I wanted to create a blog post in order to update about the progress of version 3, but also because we basically announced, without announcing anything, that we release next month. That's probably not going to happen. So the idea was that I wanted...
You can remove it probably.
Let's see. Maybe we get a search of contributors and then all of a sudden everything is done. But that's why I'm saying probably. But yeah, the idea was we get more and more questions now on Slack. We get more questions on Twitter, whatever. When is it coming out? So I wanted, and there hasn't been any official word since March 2022, last year. There hasn't been any blog post. It's just, well, this has basically just been going on these meetings. We've been discussing stuff. making progress there, but there's have been no public side of things. So the idea was that now, since the spec is well, we basically just have one issue left, I wanted to create a bit of a teaser and also to get people involved, create more hype, whatever. So what I did was create a blog post. It's not meant to describe all the features. It's not meant to be a migration guide. It's not meant to anything in those matter of terms. It's basically just a teaser about the version 3 changes. And in order to do that, I adapted our Streetlight tutorial a little bit. And I adapted it so that you can remotely turn on a specific streetlight through WebSocket that's using the request reply. And then you have Kafka where you can receive updates on lighting conditions.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
So through the Kafka interaction, I'm basically using the new union schema format where you can add, for example, Avro as part of the component section in schemas. So I'm doing that here. And then I'm using the request reply feature. And, well, of course, the new actions, operations. So people could look at this and say, what's that? Or what's that? And maybe have a little bit of a guess of what actually changed in this document from version 2. And then I provided a small list of overall changes that was done as part of like this pre-release build. All of these things are accepted and, well, merged, basically. And then talk a little bit about the remaining effort and release date, where I then clarify that instead of having a specific release date, we're gonna go with tasks most likely instead, and say, yeah. So that was the idea. Any comments?
Go with it. Go ahead, like merge it.
Merge it now.
Yeah, you need to get the approvals, but yeah, and I'm not a code owner anymore on the website, so I cannot approve it. But yeah, I'm all in with that. Let's create some hope, some hype and hope as well.
Nice.
And some hope as well that we will at some point. It's hope and hype. So yeah, let's do it. And I will even say more, like, if in my head, I think this is going to happen in September, right? That's when I think it's going to be ready. So in my head, this is the real date. But let's see.
That's also why I kind of
yeah, my best guess right now is for everything to be in September.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, so I actually didn't.
And we have holidays in the middle, so it's complicated, but might work. So I will even say more. Like, we can talk to Missy, and or for talk to some other people, studios or something like that, to prepare like a kind of video for the launch. So whenever we launch the new version, there will be like a kind of video ready to create some hype the days before we launch it. So
that could be nice.
Something like that, and we make a proper event, let's say online event, of just let's say 1 or 2 hours to announce it and to explain the new stuff, right? That would be cool, I think, to have like a kind of mini event. Well, we have one in IBM offices in London in September, right?
That's true. Yeah.
I think so. So maybe we can use that more.
That could be nice.
Yeah, so something like that.
Perfect
But
time.
that's my marketing mind trying to create hype. Let's just get it done first.
That's the general idea, yeah.
and the earlier we finish support for it, the more time we'll have to create a proper video for it, right? So where we can show some things, where we can prepare talks, small talks or lightning talks, like 20 minutes or something like that. That people can explain small things of the new spec, right? That would be cool.
It could actually be really cool if we could get the contributors that they are championed the change to actually record that their specific championing change.
Don't do that to me, man. Because I will have to be recording a bunch of videos.
I mean, you have, yeah, that's stuff. We'll see what happens, right? No,
I'm happy to share the load, and someone else can explain something that I contributed.
Free to do that, yeah.
Yeah.
For the last point, I actually added a last point here, just in order so I don't forget it. I want to have a retrospective meeting once everything is released.
Yes.
Where we can formalize anything that needs to change for whenever a next major version happens, and the learnings that we did during this. What not to do, what we could do better, what we probably should do instead, etc. Whatever. Just basically a friendly discussion about it.
Yeah, agreed. My first thought that comes to my mind is, let's not release version 4, any other major version that big with such amount of changes. I think we should be releasing major versions more often.
Do you want me to create an issue so you can like write it down as you remember?
Nah, it's okay. I will never forget about it because it's been a pain. So, and specifically for you to track all of this, it's a pain. So yeah, we should not be worried about releasing breaking changes. We can release version 4 and 5 and 6 in a year, right? People are not forced to migrate. You can stay on version 2 or version 3. We're not forcing you. This is just for us to move forward faster, right? If you want to migrate, cool, go ahead, migrate it. If you can't, don't migrate. Not yet. Maybe you want to wait from version 3 to version 6 to migrate. Cool, wait for it. Don't have to be like we all do. Like I don't use every new version of Node.js that appears, right? I don't migrate with each new version. I have projects that are running on Node.js 12, and I think we are on 19 now. So
there's also the alternative of creating major versions where a major version isn't seen as being that stable. So it's almost like an intermediate major version. So it's not something that's pushed that far, but there's like a gap between, for example, version 3 and then version 6. Version 6 is like the big push where all of the accumulated breaking changes are kind of like, okay, now we make a big push in tooling and in documentation and all of these things. So you don't make that much a deal out of a breaking change, and you can do more, like fewer smaller ones. And then at some point you can start pushing, what's it called? Yeah.
Actually, Node.js has that. So long-term support versions. So it's the even numbers are the long-term support versions. So for instance, if you want to update from Node.js 18, you don't update to 19, right? You wait until 20, right? So because 19 is a little bit of a kind of like an experimental version 20. It's like version 20 but experimental a little bit. So you can migrate, it's going to be fine, but it's not going to be long-term supported. So yeah, I don't recommend you to migrate to these old versions, right? So
Yeah.
We could do something similar. We have version 3 now. Actually, the opposite. Version 3 will be stable. Version 4 will be like an experiment. Version 5, we could do the opposit. As no,
Yeah, just do the opposite.
just to add more chaos. So yeah.
Yep.
So,
Definitely
yeah.
a possibility. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, like tooling. We don't have to update all the tools. Maybe on the odd numbers. Or maybe yes, but yeah, like we don't recommend people to migrate if you're not really experimenting with it, or if it's something long term, like you're in a company, you're doing a huge investment on async KPI. Don't use that kind experimental version, right? Use the next one, which is going to be stable, or stay in the previous one until you feel confident. And I don't know.
Possible.
So, yeah.
Something to figure out, right?
Yes, exactly. Lots of stuff.
That's all I had. Anything you'd like to finish off with?
Just thanks for all the work you're doing, man. And
thank you.
Coordinating.
You're welcome. I mean, it's a lot funner when I'm not talking to myself, like last meeting. Just saying. No, you're welcome.
And it's funny that you're not a co-owner of the spec.
Nope. I am not.
Because you don't want to. I want to leave it clear. So you were proposed to become a spec a co-owner, but yeah.
No, thank you.
It's too much. I know.
Nope. Too much.
I would just like to raise just a quick comment. We can discuss this later at some other meeting. But I think we should, after releasing version 3, we should be looking at trying to engage the community more in specs, in developing the spec further. So meaning like getting more contributors to the spec. How there are different ways to do this, right? What's the best? What if it's gonna work or not? I don't know. But my mind, for instance, I can just think about, like kind of like the mentorship program, like what we're doing, but for the spec, right? So you get paid for that mentorship. We'll explain you all the things that we do to work on the spec, which is no magic, not really at all. But it's a good mentorship, I would say, so people have the full context on what you need to do in order to contribute to the spec. Well, you never have the full context, but yeah, like things like questions, for instance, that I ask to myself when I'm developing something on the spec is it going to work with WebSockets and HTTP? Is it going to work with Kafka and QTT and so on? Does it make sense? It might work, but it might not make sense. Is it going to work with request reply now, for instance? How this is all going to play together? And the other features of the spec, if something is going to look weird or out of place. So these are questions that I ask to myself. Usually, the WebSocket one
might actually be nice to have. What's this like? I don't want to say guide dogs, but it's like it's such a huge, not a huge undertaking, but it's is a decent undertaking to change anything in the spec, and there's a lot of discussions going on, and it can feel like a black box where it's like, I have no idea whether I'm doing this, like, should I do something different? Just need someone to talk to about it, basically. Might be a good idea to have someone that you can pair with, that already have done work on the spec before. So it's like,
Yes.
they know the the process, or know who to talk to, or guide them in some way or other.
Yeah, like
So it's like, so they aren't alone in the world. It might be a good idea there, because it can feel like you're the only one caring about that specific issue, and you don't get a lot of interactions or whatever. So might be nice to have basically a buddy to pair up with.
Yeah, that's another one, a good one. Another one is something that we were talking today, Samir and I, is like the thing, this keep that Kafka has, is Kafka improvement proposal, these long documents for that you need to fulfill. It's like a template document that you have to fulfill whenever you want to add some proposal to it, whenever to add some change to Kafka. Right? And it's cool because it's full of questions that you will have to answer, right? So it forces you to think in those terms. Like, for instance, this thing that I just said, like, is it going to play well with WebSockets, or how is it going to play with WebSockets or client server connections with broker-based communication? How this is going to work? Explain it here, right? All these things can be in a template and in that kind of documents. So we force people to answer those questions before they submit a proposal, right? Or at the time that they are submitting a proposal, right? So they need to think about it before actually opening an issue. So yeah, and then of course, during the process of fulfilling that document, you can have your buddy to help you with this, like to champion it together or something like that, or to help you champion it. So yeah, I think that will be useful.
Might also be a good idea to get, like, not feedback, but hear from people that has contributed, what they're, both those that did and those that chose not to. So it's like, why did you, for example, choose to do the contribution? Why did you go through with it, for example? So anything specific that made you do it? And if you didn't do it, was it just one big black box that felt like it was too much overall, or is there anything that can be better explained? Or yeah, it's a lot of things that
even gamify it a little bit, right?
True. Yeah.
Gamification is a
It doesn't hurt.
Good idea.
Definitely doesn't hurt.
Yeah, like you have like a ranking or something like that. You get maybe some swag packs when you contribute certain amount of things to Spec. You get, I don't know, you get, today we were discussing these things, Samir and I, so, but not for the Spec, but for Studio, right? But I think it still applies. So you get like a check, like a bonus for you for conference, travel, and accommodation. So for instance, this is like, I don't know, this is worth $500 for conference, travel, and accommodation. So whenever you want to go to a conference, you can open an expense on Open Collective and say, I want to get the money of this specific check that I have, right? And use it to reimburse, I don't know, some traveling or accommodation costs that I had, right? Something like that. You can accumulate them. If you contribute a lot, you might end up with a lot of money there, right? So I don't know, things like this might be cool.
I agree.
Not just for the Spec and for Studio, we can actually explore this for many other projects as well. But yeah, to incentivize a little bit people to get into the complex things, you know, because it's easy to submit a pull request about, you know, adding a button here and there or styles or things like this. But, you know, like to get into the real meat, right?
Yep.
So.
Cool. All right. Thanks for joining, folks. And see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.